What if I told you that hidden within the dust of ancient scrolls and the whispers of long-forgotten tongues lie stories so powerful they've shaped the very fabric of human civilization? For as long as we've gathered around fires, beneath stars, or in the quiet corners of candlelit rooms, we've been spellbound by myths and mysteries, tales that defy time, logic, and sometimes even belief. These aren't just stories, they're echoes of our deepest fears, our wildest dreams, and the unanswered questions that keep us awake at night. And today, we're embarking on a journey through 35 of the most enchanting narratives ever woven into history's grand tapestry. From vanished cities to cursed artifacts, from gods who walked among mortals to prophecies that still send shivers down our spines, these legends have not only survived centuries but thrived, evolving into the cultural bedrock of entire societies. Think about it, why do these stories still grip us? Why does the name Atlantis stir something primal in our imaginations, or the riddle of the Sphinx make us lean in closer? It's because mysteries are mirrors. They reflect our longing to understand the unknown, to touch the edges of what we can't explain. Every culture, every era has its own version of these tales, whether it's the Norse saga's whispering of Ragnarok, the Aboriginal dreamtime painting the world into being, or the eerie silence of Roanoke's lost colony. These aren't just footnotes in history books, they're living, breathing puzzles that challenge us to look beyond what we think we know, and the most fascinating part. Some of these enigmas might never be solved. That's the magic of them. They leave room for wonder, for debate, for the thrill of the hunt. So let's step into the shadows together, where history blurs into legend and the line between fact and folklore fades. Over the next 35 stories, we'll uncover civilizations swallowed by the sea, decipher codes that have baffled scholars for generations, and walk alongside figures who might have been heroes, or merely myths spun from time's endless loom. This isn't just a recounting of old tales, it's an invitation to rediscover the world as it once was, and perhaps as it still could be, because somewhere in these mysteries there's a piece of us waiting to be found. Ready to begin, the first story starts where all great adventures do, in the depths of the unknown. The story of Atlantis begins not with explorers or ancient maps, but with a philosopher, Plato, who first described this fabled island in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BC. He tells of a mighty seafaring empire, a utopia of towering rings of land and water, advanced beyond measure. Its people commanded technology that seemed miraculous even by today's standards, energy harnessed from crystals, machines that defied nature, and a society so prosperous it rivaled the gods themselves. But their pride became their downfall. According to Plato, Atlantis angered the deities with its greed and corruption, and in a single night of fire and flood, the ocean swallowed it whole. Gone, vanished without a trace. What's fascinating is how precise Plato's details were. He placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, describing it as larger than Asia and Libya combined. But here's the mystery. Was he recounting history or crafting a cautionary tale? Some scholars argue Atlantis was pure allegory, a warning about the dangers of hubris. Others insist it was based on real events, pointing to the volcanic destruction of Santorini around 1600 BCE, which obliterated the Minoan civilization in a cataclysm eerily similar to Plato's account. Then there's the wilder fringe theories linking Atlantis to Antarctica, the Bahamas, even a hidden dimension. But why does this legend endure? Perhaps because Atlantis represents the ultimate what if. A mirror to our own anxieties about societal collapse, lost knowledge, and the fragility of human achievement. Every few years, a new expedition claims to have found clues. Strange formations off the coast of Spain, underwater ruins near the Azores. Yet the truth remains as elusive as ever, buried beneath layers of myth and ocean, and maybe that's the point. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to keep us searching. The moment Howard Carter broke through the sealed doorway of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, stood beside him as candlelight flickered across the first glimpse of gold, countless treasures untouched for over 3,000 years. "Can you see anything?" Carnarvon whispered. Carter's reply has echoed through history. "Yes, wonderful things." But what followed wasn't just wonder. It was a wave of eerie misfortune that would ignite one of archaeology's most enduring legends, the Curse of the Pharaohs. Within months, Lord Carnarvon was dead, his blood poisoned by a mosquito bite gone septic. Newspapers seized on the tragedy, claiming he'd been struck down by ancient vengeance. Then came more deaths. A financier who'd visited the tomb collapsed suddenly. A radiologist who examined the mummy died of an unknown illness. Even Carnarvon's dog reportedly howled and dropped dead at the exact moment his master passed. By 1929, 11 people connected to the excavation had died under strange circumstances. The public was spellbound. Had Carter unleashed a supernatural reckoning? Science, of course, offers cooler explanations. Bacteria trapped in the tomb, aspergillus molds. Toxic spores could have infected those who breathed in the ancient air. Then there's simple probability. With so many people involved in the excavation, some untimely deaths were statistically likely, but skeptics can't dismiss every oddity. Take the story of the canary. On the day the tomb was opened, Carter's pet canary was swallowed by a cobra, a snake symbolizing protection in Egyptian royalty. Coincidence or a warning from the gods? What's undeniable is the curse's grip on popular culture. From Hollywood films to conspiracy theories, Tut's curse reshaped how we imagine archaeology itself. It tapped into a primal fear that disturbing the past carries consequences, and perhaps that's the real power of the legend, not in proving curses exist, but in reminding us that some secrets once unearthed can't be reburied. The gold of Tutankhamun's mask still glows, but it's the shadows behind it that keep us staring. Imagine holding a book where every page brims with secrets, where the words look almost familiar, yet slip through your fingers like smoke. That's the enigma of the Voynich Manuscript, a 600-year-old puzzle wrapped in vellum and written in a language no one has ever cracked. Discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfred Voynich, this strange volume contains over 200 pages of handwritten text alongside illustrations that defy explanation. Plants that don't match any known species, celestial charts with unknown constellations, and even nude women bathing in what appears to be green liquid. The script flows like a real alphabet with repeating patterns and grammatical structure, yet linguists, cryptographers, and even wartime codebreakers, including those who deciphered Nazi messages, have all been stumped. What makes the Voynich manuscript so tantalizing is the sheer persistence of its mystery. Carbon dating places its creation between 1404 and 1438, likely in northern Italy. Some theorize it's the work of an alchemist, encoding forbidden knowledge in symbols to avoid persecution. Others suggest it's an elaborate medieval hoax, a meaningless jumble designed to deceive wealthy collectors. The most compelling clue, the illustrations hint at a coherent system. Herbal sections resemble pharmacopoeias, while astronomical diagrams suggest a connection to Renaissance science. But without a Rosetta Stone to unlock its language, every breakthrough crumbles under scrutiny. Recent attempts have turned to artificial intelligence, with algorithms analyzing word frequency and syntax. In 2019, a Canadian team claimed the text might be Hebrew encoded through an alphagram cipher, but their translations produced only fragmented, surreal phrases like "she made recommendations to the priest" alongside nonsensical plant names. Skeptics argue that if the manuscript were genuine, statistical analysis would have revealed more by now. Yet the book's resilience keeps doubters questioning, could it be a lost dialect? A constructed language like Tolkien's Elvish, but centuries older? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between genius and deception. The Voynich Manuscript taps into our obsession with unsolved riddles, the kind that whisper just loudly enough to keep us listening. It's a reminder that even in an age of satellites and supercomputers, some pages refuse to give up their ghosts. And maybe that's why we can't look away, because the idea that knowledge might exist just beyond our grasp is the most enduring mystery of all. Somewhere in the vast blue expanse between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico lies a patch of ocean that has swallowed ships, planes, and hundreds of lives without a trace. The Bermuda Triangle is more than just a stretch of water. It's a riddle wrapped in disappearances, tangled with theories, and steeped in the kind of mystery that refuses to fade. One of the most chilling cases begins in 1945 with 5 U.S. Navy bombers known as Flight 19. On a routine training mission, the squadron's leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, radioed in confusion, reporting compass failures and impossible landmarks. "We can't be sure of any direction," he said. "Everything looks wrong." Then silence. A rescue plane sent to find them vanished too. Not a single wreckage fragment was ever recovered. Then there's the USS Cyclops, a massive cargo ship carrying over 300 crewmen and 10,000 tons of manganese ore. In March 1918, it sailed into the Triangle's haze and never sailed out. No distress call, no debris, just a vessel the size of a city block gone as if wiped from existence. These aren't isolated incidents. Over the past century, the Triangle has claimed small boats, commercial jets, even a team of underwater researchers who dove to investigate the seabed and never resurfaced. But what's really happening here? Science offers compelling answers. Methane hydrates trapped beneath the ocean floor could erupt in colossal bubbles, swallowing ships whole by reducing water density in an instant. Rogue waves, walls of water over 100 feet tall, might explain vessels torn apart without warning. And let's not forget the Triangle's unique geography. The Gulf Stream's violent currents, combined with unpredictable weather and shallow reefs, create a perfect storm of natural hazards. Then there are the supernatural theories, tales of alien abductions, time warps, and the lost city of Atlantis lurking beneath the waves persist for a reason. Pop culture loves a good mystery, and the Triangle delivers, fueling everything from Spielberg films to paranormal documentaries. But perhaps the truth lies in our own fascination. The Bermuda Triangle endures because it forces us to confront the terrifying vastness of the unknown. Even with satellites and sonar, the ocean keeps its secrets close. And sometimes the most unsettling answer is the simplest. Nature doesn't need ghosts to be deadly. It already is. High above the dusty plains of southern Peru, etched into the earth with such precision they can only be truly seen from the sky, the Nazca Lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles of desert like a giant sketchbook. These ancient geoglyphs, some as long as 1,200 feet, depict spiders with legs curled for attack, hummingbirds mid-flight, even a strange humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut, its hollow eyes staring up at the cosmos. Created between 500 BC and 500 CE by the Nazca people, the lines were made by removing the reddish topsoil to reveal lighter-colored earth beneath, a technique that's kept them visible for over 2,000 years despite winds, droughts, and time itself. But here's what baffles archaeologists. How did a civilization with no known aerial technology design such massive, perfectly proportioned figures they could never see in their entirety from the ground? Theories about their purpose are as varied as the shapes themselves. Some researchers argue the lines functioned as a celestial calendar, with certain glyphs aligning with solstices or constellations. The hummingbird, for instance, points directly to the rising sun during the summer solstice, a possible marker for planting seasons. Others believe they were sacred pathways for religious processions, walkable prayers to gods who watched from above. Then there's the more controversial idea. Could these have been landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors? The alien runway hypothesis gained traction in the 1960s, fueled by the sheer scale of the geometric lines, some running arrow straight for miles, and the eerie resemblance of certain figures to modern-day astronaut suits. But the real mystery isn't just why they were made, it's how they've survived. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, with rainfall so scarce that the lines have avoided erosion. Yet even this natural preservation can't explain their crisp edges after millennia. Recent studies suggest the Nazca people may have used a form of mineral crust stabilization, mixing clay and gypsum to create a protective layer. But human interference now poses the greatest threat. In 2018, a truck driver plowed through 3 glyphs, leaving tire scars that took experts months to repair. What makes the Nazca Lines timeless isn't just their scale or artistry, it's the unsettling question they force us to confront: how much knowledge have we lost? A civilization without satellites or drones mapped the heavens onto the Earth, leaving behind a message we still can't fully decipher. Whether they were meant for gods, stars, or something beyond our understanding, one thing's certain: these desert drawings are more than art. They're a challenge from the past, daring us to look closer. In the late 16th century, a group of 115 English settlers landed on the sandy shores of Roanoke Island, eager to carve out a new life in the untamed wilderness of the Americas. They were led by John White, a governor and artist whose sketches would later become some of the only surviving records of their doomed endeavor. But when White returned to England for supplies, war with Spain delayed his voyage back for 3 long years. By the time he finally set foot on Roanoke again in 1590, the colony had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no battle scars, just an eerie silence and 2 cryptic clues: the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post and the letters CRO etched into a tree. The entire population, men, women, and even the first English child born in the New World, White's own granddaughter Virginia Dare, had disappeared into thin air. Theories about their fate have spiraled for centuries. The most enduring suggests they integrated with the Croatoan people, a native tribe on nearby Hatteras Island. Archaeological digs in recent years have uncovered European artifacts: a signet ring, pottery fragments, even sword hilts buried alongside indigenous tools, hinting at cultural exchange. Some believe the settlers, desperate for survival, may have split into smaller groups, some assimilating with tribes while others perished from disease or starvation. Then there's the darker possibility: violent conflict. Spanish records from the time mention rumors of English settlers being slaughtered, and a single massacre could explain the lack of bodies. But the most chilling twist: recent ground-penetrating radar scans have revealed strange underground formations near Roanoke, possibly hinting at hidden structures or mass graves. Researchers have also found a patch of land where the soil chemistry suggests a sudden, concentrated human presence, perhaps the last stand of a dying community. Yet despite these tantalizing clues, no smoking gun has emerged. The fate of the lost colony remains as elusive as the whispers of the wind through those ancient oaks. What makes Roanoke endure isn't just the mystery, it's the symbolism. This wasn't just a failed settlement, it was the birthplace of the first English child in the Americas, a fleeting hope for a new beginning. The colony's disappearance became a cautionary tale of ambition clashing with the unforgiving unknown. Every new theory, every fresh excavation keeps the story alive, a ghostly reminder that history doesn't always leave answers. Sometimes it only leaves questions. And perhaps that's why we can't let it go, because in those empty cabins and silent forests, we see our own fragile place in the world, teetering between survival and oblivion. The Atlantic Ocean was calm on that December morning in 1872, when the crew of the Dei Gratia spotted a ship drifting aimlessly near the Azores. Its sails were tattered, its hull intact, but not a soul was aboard. This was the Mary Celeste, a merchant brigantine that had left New York Harbor 8 days earlier with 10 people on board, including Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and a seasoned crew. Every personal belonging, from jewelry to clothing, remained untouched. Even the ship's logbook lay open on the captain's desk, its final entry dated 10 days prior, with no hint of distress. The last words written were utterly mundane: 3 small sails sighted to the east. So what could have driven an entire crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel? The theories range from the plausible to the fantastical. Forensic science points to the cargo, 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. Some barrels were later found empty, their seals broken. Could fumes have leaked, creating an explosion risk that panicked the crew into fleeing? Experiments show that alcohol vapor, when ignited, can produce a ghostly flash fire, a burst of flame that leaves no scorch marks. Witnesses would swear the ship was about to blow, only to watch the danger vanish as quickly as it appeared. Others suspect a mutiny or piracy, though no signs of violence were found. The ship's lifeboat was missing, suggesting a deliberate evacuation. Yet why would experienced sailors abandon ship without taking their navigational instruments or even their coats in the middle of winter? Then come the wilder speculations, stories of giant squid attacks, waterspouts hurling men overboard, or even a portal to another dimension swallowing the crew whole. Arthur Conan Doyle, years before creating Sherlock Holmes, spun a fictional account involving a vengeful ex-slave with a murderous grudge, a tale so gripping it blurred the line between fact and folklore. Modern investigations have added chilling layers to the mystery. In 2001, marine archaeologists studying the Mary Celeste's hull found strange stress fractures in the wood, evidence of extreme pressure. Could a sudden, rogue wave have struck the ship, terrifying the crew into believing it was sinking? Oceanographers note that such waves, walls of water over 80 feet tall, can appear without warning, then vanish just as quickly. The crew might have launched the lifeboat, only to be dragged under when the ship miraculously stayed afloat. But the most haunting question isn't what happened, it's why the Mary Celeste story clings to us so fiercely. Perhaps because it embodies our deepest fear, the idea that disaster can strike without logic, without a trail, leaving only silence in its wake. The sea keeps its secrets well. And sometimes the most unnerving mysteries aren't those with answers, but those where every explanation feels just out of reach. The streets of Strasbourg were alive with movement in the scorching summer of 1518, but this was no festival. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the square one July day and began to dance. Not the measured steps of celebration, but a frantic, jerking motion, as if her limbs were no longer her own. Within a week, 34 more joined her. By month's end, over 400 people convulsed in the squares, their feet bleeding, their bodies wasting away as they danced without rest. Some collapsed from exhaustion, only to rise and writhe again moments later. Authorities, desperate to stop the madness, built stages and hired musicians, believing the afflicted needed to dance it out. But the plague didn't stop. It lasted for 2 months, leaving scores dead from heart failure or sheer physical collapse. What could drive an entire city to dance itself to death? One theory points to ergot, a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye bread. When ingested, it causes hallucinations, muscle spasms, and a burning sensation in the limbs, symptoms that mirror historical accounts. Medieval Europe was no stranger to ergotism, nicknamed St. Anthony's Fire for the searing pain it inflicted. But skeptics argue the dancing lacked other telltale signs like gangrene or vomiting. Others propose mass psychogenic illness, a kind of social contagion where fear and suggestion override reason. Strasbourg had been ravaged by famine and disease for years. The dancing may have been a collective breakdown under unrelenting stress. Then there's the supernatural angle. Chroniclers of the time called it a curse, divine punishment for sins. Some victims reportedly screamed for mercy, claiming they couldn't stop unless saints intervened. The church even organized processions to shrines, begging for deliverance. Intriguingly, this wasn't an isolated event. Similar outbreaks struck Europe as far back as the 14th century, often near rivers or during periods of extreme hardship. Was it environmental poisoning, collective trauma, or something older? A pagan ritual gone horribly wrong? Modern researchers still grapple with the enigma. Neurologists suggest the dancers may have suffered from Sydenham's chorea, a disorder linked to strep infections that causes involuntary movements, yet no single explanation fits all the clues. The dancing plague endures because it defies categorization, part medical mystery, part psychological thriller, wholly unsettling. It forces us to confront how fragile the line is between body and mind, between control and chaos. And perhaps that's why it lingers in our imagination, because in those fevered, twitching crowds, we see a reflection of our own vulnerability. The terrifying idea that, under the right conditions, any of us could lose ourselves to the rhythm of the inexplicable. In the quiet desert town of Taos, New Mexico, not everything is as peaceful as it seems. Since the early 1990s, a strange phenomenon has plagued some residents, a relentless, low-frequency hum, described as a distant diesel engine idling or the sound of thunder just beyond the horizon. But here's the catch: only about 2% of people can hear it. The Taos hum has become one of the most baffling auditory mysteries of our time, a sound without a source that torments its hearers day and night while leaving others completely untouched. So what could be causing this elusive noise? Some researchers point to geology. Beneath Taos lies a network of underground faults and volcanic formations, and seismic activity can sometimes produce infrasound frequencies so low they're just below human hearing. For certain individuals, these vibrations might tip into audible range, creating the hum. Others suggest industrial sources like massive power lines or secret military experiments. The nearby Philmont Scout Ranch houses high-frequency radio transmitters, and government projects have long been rumored to test sonic weapons or clandestine communications. But the most intriguing theory involves the human brain itself. Neurologists have found that some people are hypersensitive to low-frequency sounds due to variations in auditory processing. In rare cases, tinnitus, a condition causing phantom noise, can manifest as a persistent hum. Yet even this doesn't explain why the phenomenon clusters in Taos. Could it be a combination of environmental factors and biological susceptibility? The emotional toll on hearers is undeniable. Many report insomnia, headaches, and even despair from the unending noise. Some have moved away only to find the hum follows them, suggesting a psychological component. But dismissing it as mere imagination doesn't fit. Scientists have recorded anomalous acoustic frequencies in the area, though nothing that fully explains the phenomenon. What makes the Taos hum so unsettling isn't just the mystery, it's the isolation of those who hear it. Living with a sound no one else perceives is a uniquely alienating experience. Whether the source is geological, man-made, or something deeper in the fabric of perception, the hum lingers like a question without an answer, and for now the desert keeps its secret. Deep in the woods of Nova Scotia, a small island holds a secret that has driven men to obsession, bankruptcy, and even death for over 200 years. Oak Island's so-called money pit is no ordinary hole in the ground. It's a labyrinth of tunnels, flood traps, and cryptic stone markers, all hinting at a treasure buried with deliberate, almost cruel ingenuity. The story begins in 1795, when a teenager named Daniel Maginnis spotted strange lights on the island and discovered a circular depression in the soil. Below it, pickaxes struck wood every 10 feet. Layers of oak logs, coconut fiber, and charcoal, materials foreign to the region. Then, at 90 feet, they hit a stone slab inscribed with symbols. A cipher later translated to read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried. But when they dug further, seawater exploded into the shaft, filling it in minutes. Whoever built this didn't want it found. Over the centuries, the pit has devoured fortunes and lives. In 1849, the Truro Company's drill brought up 3 gold links from an unseen chest before the tunnel flooded again. In 1861, a man died when a boiler burst, scalding him alive. Then came the infamous 90-foot stone disappearance. The slab with the cipher vanished after being sent to a Halifax jeweler, leaving only sketchy transcriptions behind. Theories about what lies at the bottom range from pirate loot, Captain Kidd's hoard, or Blackbeard's plunder, to grander conspiracies, lost manuscripts of Shakespeare, smuggled relics of the Knights Templar, even Marie Antoinette's missing jewels. The most tantalizing clue, a scrap of parchment pulled from the depths in 1897, bearing the letters Roman 6 in ink, possibly a fragment of a longer document. Modern treasure hunters haven't given up. The Lagina brothers, stars of the History Channel's The Curse of Oak Island, have deployed sonar, drones, and even geotechnical boreholes. In 2014, their team uncovered a 17th-century Spanish copper coin and a lead cross possibly linked to the Templars. Then, in 2019, they hit an anomaly, a massive underground void filled with metal detected by seismic imaging. Could this finally be the vault? Skeptics argue the pit is a natural sinkhole layered with coincidences, while true believers point to the island's bizarre history of coded markers and artificial flood tunnels. What makes Oak Island more than just a treasure hunt is its psychological grip. It's a riddle wrapped in a trap, a story where each clue leads to 3 more dead ends. The island seems to taunt those who seek its secrets, offering just enough hope to keep them digging. Whether the prize is gold or merely the thrill of the chase, one thing's certain: the money pit isn't just hiding treasure. It's hiding the reason why, after all this time, we still can't walk away. On the night of August 15, 1977, a radio telescope in Delaware, Ohio, picked up a signal so extraordinary that the astronomer who discovered it scribbled, "Wow," in red ink on the printout, and gave birth to one of the greatest cosmic mysteries of our time. For 72 seconds, the Big Ear telescope recorded a narrowband radio burst blazing at 50 times the background noise, perfectly matching the frequency of hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. This wasn't static or satellite interference. It was a signal that screamed artificial, as if something or someone had aimed a cosmic spotlight directly at Earth. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. What made the WOW signal so electrifying was its precision. The frequency, 1420 MHz, falls within the quiet zone of the radio spectrum, a range where natural cosmic noise is minimal, making it an obvious channel for interstellar communication. The signal's intensity spiked and faded exactly as expected if it originated from deep space, sweeping past the telescope's fixed antenna due to Earth's rotation. Yet despite decades of searching, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, has never detected a repeat. Not once. Theories about its origin swing from the plausible to the poetic. Some scientists argue it could have been a comet's hydrogen cloud reflecting sunlight, though later studies debunked this when the proposed comets weren't in the right position. Others suggest a military satellite or secret transmission, but no known human technology matched the signal's unique profile. Then there's the spine-tingling possibility. Was it a fleeting hello from another civilization? A cosmic flare gun shot once by design to make us wonder. The legacy of the WOW signal isn't just in the data, it's in the question it forces us to confront. In a universe teeming with hundreds of billions of galaxies, are we really alone? Or was that fleeting 72 seconds our first brush with something beyond our understanding? Until another signal comes, we're left staring at the stars, listening for an echo that might never arrive. And maybe that's the point. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to keep us listening. Imagine a corroded lump of bronze and wood, pulled from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck off the coast of a tiny Greek island. At first glance, it looked like worthless debris until researchers realized they were holding the most sophisticated mechanical device of the ancient world. The Antikythera Mechanism, named for the island near where it was found in 1901, wasn't just a navigational tool or clock. It was an astronomical calculator of staggering complexity, able to predict lunar eclipses, track the cycles of the Olympic Games, and model the erratic motions of planets with a precision that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. The genius lies in its gears, over 30 interlocking bronze wheels, some with teeth so tiny they resemble watchmaking. X-ray imaging revealed inscriptions that functioned like an instruction manual, explaining how to read the device's dials. One face displayed the Greek zodiac, another showed the phases of the moon. Turn the handle and the mechanism would simulate celestial movements, accounting for gravitational wobbles that wouldn't be mathematically described for another millennium. This wasn't just ahead of its time, it was 1,000 years ahead. Who built it? The leading candidate is Archimedes, the legendary mathematician said to have created celestial spheres so intricate, Romans looted them as war trophies. Cicero himself wrote of a device which could imitate the motions of the heavens, though no physical evidence survived until now. Skeptics argue the mechanism's craftsmanship suggests a later origin, perhaps the workshop of Hipparchus, the father of trigonometry. But here's the twist. Recent scans uncovered a hidden feature, a tiny, dual-sided gear capable of calculating the timing of ancient athletic games, hinting at a cultural purpose beyond pure science. What's truly haunting is how much knowledge was lost. The Antikythera Mechanism's technology vanished from history, its principles forgotten until the 14th century, when mechanical clocks re-emerged in Europe. Was it a one-off marvel, or were there others, lost to time and the sea? Every new discovery, like the 2001 finding of a second, potential mechanism fragment in the same wreck, only deepens the enigma. This isn't just a relic, it's a ghost of a world far more advanced than we imagined, a reminder that history's puzzle is missing pieces we may never find. And perhaps that's the mechanism's final lesson. Brilliance flickers, but curiosity outlasts even the tides. The Ural Mountains should have been a winter paradise in February 1959, a pristine wilderness of snow and silence. But when a group of 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, ventured into those slopes, something went terribly wrong. Days later, their abandoned tent was found ripped open from the inside, as if they'd fled in panic. Footprints led into the tree line, but the bodies told a story far stranger than mere exposure. One man's skull was crushed, a woman was missing her tongue. Others had internal injuries but no external wounds, as if they'd been hit by an invisible force. Their clothing showed traces of radiation, the official verdict. A compelling natural force, case closed, but the Dyatlov Pass incident would become one of history's most chilling unsolved mysteries. Could an avalanche explain the horror? Modern reconstructions suggest a rare slab avalanche, a sudden, brutal collapse of snow, might have forced the hikers to slash their way out of the tent and flee half-dressed into sub-zero temperatures. Hypothermia could account for irrational behavior, like stripping off clothes in the cold. But skeptics point to the injuries. A crushed skull and chest fractures resemble the impact of a catastrophic blast, not snow. Then there's the radiation. Some hikers' clothes emitted faint but measurable radioactivity, fueling theories of secret Soviet military tests. The area was near a missile testing range, and declassified documents reveal parachute mines were being developed, weapons that could cause internal trauma without leaving marks. But the wildest theories refused to die. Indigenous Mansi tribes spoke of vengeful spirits haunting the pass, while others whispered of Yeti attacks. In 2019, a researcher proposed an even stranger culprit: ball lightning or a plasma vortex, natural phenomena that could explain both the radiation and the force that shattered bones. Yet no single theory fits every clue. The missing tongue, scavengers could have taken it post-mortem. The radiation, maybe the hikers' lanterns used thorium, a mildly radioactive element. What makes Dyatlov Pass linger in our nightmares isn't just the gruesome details, it's the unanswered question of what drives 9 rational people to flee into certain death. Was it panic, weapons testing, or something beyond our understanding? The mountains keep their secrets, and sometimes the most terrifying mysteries aren't those with answers, but those that remind us how little we truly control. In a dimly lit cathedral in Turin, Italy, a single piece of linen has ignited debates, devotions, and scientific scrutiny for centuries. The Shroud of Turin, a 14-foot-long cloth bearing the faint but unmistakable imprint of a crucified man, is either the most sacred relic in Christianity or the most elaborate medieval hoax, and the evidence swings wildly between both. At first glance, the image seems simple: the shadowy outline of a bearded man with wounds matching the biblical accounts of Jesus' crucifixion, spear marks on his side, lacerations from scourging, even what appear to be nail holes in the wrist. But look closer, and the shroud becomes a riddle wrapped in enigma. The controversy erupted in 1988 when radiocarbon dating tests conducted by 3 independent labs placed the shroud's origin between 1260 and 1390, squarely in the medieval period. Case closed? Not quite. Critics quickly pointed out flaws. The sample tested came from a corner that might have been repaired after a fire in the 16th century, skewing the results. Later studies found chemical traces of vanillin, a compound that breaks down over time, in the main body of the shroud, but not in the tested edge, suggesting the fabric could be far older. Even more puzzling, the image itself defies replication. It's not painted, dyed, or scorched into the fibers. Instead, it's a superficial discoloration only on the topmost threads, as if produced by a brief, intense burst of light. Forensic experts who analyzed the bloodstains confirmed they contain real hemoglobin and bilirubin, consistent with severe trauma. And here's the kicker: the blood flaked off before the image formed, meaning whatever created the image didn't disturb the blood patterns, a sequence impossible to fake with medieval technology. Then there's the artistry angle. Some researchers argue the shroud matches the proportions and style of 14th century depictions of Christ, suggesting an artist could have crafted it using a primitive form of photography, a camera obscura projecting an image onto linen coated with silver sulfate. Yet no other artwork from that era comes close to this level of anatomical precision. The shroud's 3-dimensional data, when analyzed by Nazca VP8 image enhancer in the 1970s, revealed startling depth information, something no medieval painter could have intentionally encoded. Even the pollen grains trapped in the fabric tell a story. They include species native to Jerusalem, consistent with a Middle Eastern origin. What keeps the debate alive isn't just science, it's the human longing to touch the divine. Whether the shroud is a miracle or a masterful forgery, it challenges us to confront the limits of knowledge. For believers, it's a tangible connection to the resurrection. For skeptics, it's proof of humanity's endless capacity for myth-making, and for scientists, it's a maddening, magnificent puzzle, one that may never surrender its final secret. The shroud endures because it asks the ultimate question: can a single piece of cloth bridge the gap between faith and fact? The answer, like the image itself, remains just out of focus. The letters arrived like clockwork, taunting, cryptic, and dripping with malice. Between 1968 and 1969, the Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California, leaving at least 5 victims and a trail of ciphers so complex they've outsmarted codebreakers for half a century. His first 2 murders were a brutal ambush: 2 teenagers shot at a lover's lane in Vallejo. Then came the stabbing of a couple at Lake Berryessa, where the killer wore a grotesque hooded costume stitched with his own symbol, a crosshair circle. But it wasn't just the violence that chilled the public, it was the games. The Zodiac sent letters to newspapers boasting of his crimes and demanding they be printed alongside his ciphers. One note included a 32-symbol cipher with the threat: "If you don't print this cipher, I will go on a kill rampage." The first cipher, known as Z340, was cracked within days by a high school teacher and his wife, a gruesome proclamation: "I like killing people because it is so much fun." But the subsequent codes, Z348 and the infamous 340 cipher, have resisted every attempt. The 340 cipher, a grid of 63 symbols, was finally declared solved in 2020 by a team of amateur cryptographers using a mix of pattern recognition and sheer perseverance. Their breakthrough, the killer used a homophonic substitution cipher where multiple symbols can represent the same letter, layered with intentional errors to throw off investigators. The decrypted message was unsettlingly mundane. "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. No confession, no name, just another taunt. Who was he?" The list of suspects reads like a noir thriller. Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted pedophile, was the FBI's top pick. Friends recalled him owning the same rare brand of typewriter ribbon used in the letters and joking about hunting humans. Then there's Ross Sullivan, a mentally unstable librarian obsessed with codes who vanished after the murders. Even Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was briefly considered due to his Bay Area ties. But DNA evidence has been inconclusive, and the case files remain frustratingly open. The real horror lies in what we still don't know. The 348 cipher, 18 lines of jumbled symbols, might hold the key. In 2021, a team using artificial intelligence identified potential letter frequencies, but the message remains scrambled. Could the killer's identity be buried in those symbols? Or was the Zodiac's greatest trick making us chase shadows? His last confirmed letter arrived in 1974, signed with a chilling postscript: "I am waiting for a good movie about me." The case may be cold, but the ciphers keep whispering, and someone, somewhere, might still be listening. The legends speak of 13 crystal skulls scattered across the globe, each carved with impossible precision from a single block of flawless quartz. According to the myth, when reunited, these artifacts would unlock ancient wisdom, or even open gateways to other dimensions. Their origins, supposedly the vanished civilizations of the Maya or Aztecs, crafted by artisans wielding lost technologies beyond modern comprehension. But the truth behind these glittering enigmas is far stranger than any fiction, a tale of deception, obsession, and the irresistible allure of the unknown. The most famous of these skulls, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, emerged in the early 20th century with a story straight out of adventure pulp novels. Explorer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges claimed his daughter discovered it beneath a Mayan altar in Belize in 1924, its jawbone found separately months later. Its craftsmanship was uncanny, no tool marks, no signs of modern machinery, just smooth curves and a hollow interior that defied explanation. For decades, it fueled speculation. Was this proof of laser technology in antiquity? A relic from Atlantis, but scientific scrutiny would peel back the layers of the mystery. In 2008, researchers at the British Museum and Smithsonian analyzed several skulls, including the Mitchell-Hedges piece, using electron microscopy. The verdict: microscopic abrasions from 19th century jewelers' wheels. The skulls weren't ancient at all. They were likely crafted in Germany between 1860 and 1890, a booming era for European workshops producing antiquities for wealthy collectors. So why does the myth persist? Part of it is pure cinematic charm. The skulls became icons thanks to pop culture, from Indiana Jones films to X-Files episodes. But there's a deeper pull. Crystal, especially clear quartz, has long been shrouded in mysticism. Ancient cultures from the Maya to the Tibetans believed it could store knowledge or amplify spiritual energy. Modern pseudoscience latched onto this, suggesting the skulls were data banks left by aliens or advanced pre-flood civilizations. The very hardness of quartz makes the carving seem impossible without futuristic tools, even though artisans like Eugene Bobin, a 19th century French dealer later tied to several fakes, proved otherwise. Yet the most fascinating twist isn't the hoax, it's what the skulls reveal about us. We want to believe in lost worlds and hidden powers. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, for all its debunking, still draws pilgrims convinced it radiates healing energy. Museums display them not as frauds but as cultural touchstones, symbols of how easily history and fantasy intertwine. And maybe that's their real magic, not in opening portals, but in holding up a mirror to our endless hunger for wonder. After all, in a world where everything can be explained, some of us still need a ghost of mystery to chase. The Demeter was supposed to be an ordinary merchant vessel, a two-masted schooner carrying a cargo of silver sand from Varna to Whitby in the summer of 1884. But when it washed ashore in England with no crew and no explanation, it became the stuff of nightmares. The ship's log told a chilling story. One by one, the sailors had vanished, their last entries scrawled in frantic, disjointed fragments. "Something strange is moving in the hold," one wrote. Another simply said, "God help me." By the time the Demeter ran aground, the only living thing left on board was a gaunt, starving dog cowering in the shadows. Bram Stoker would later seize on this eerie incident, using it as the backbone for one of the most terrifying chapters in Dracula, The Voyage of the Demeter, where the vampire picks off the crew like flies under the cover of night. But the real mystery isn't just how Stoker twisted fact into fiction, it's what really happened to those sailors. Some historians point to mass hysteria, a psychological contagion fueled by cramped quarters and the superstitions of the sea. Others suggest a more sinister culprit, disease. The late 19th century was a golden age of cholera and yellow fever outbreaks, and ships were floating petri dishes. A single infected rat could have sparked panic, driving men overboard in delirium. Yet the details don't quite fit. The log entries describe something physical, something the crew tried and failed to fight. Witnesses in Whitby swore they saw a tall, gaunt figure leaping from the wreckage onto shore, though no such man was ever found. Could it have been a stowaway, a murderer hiding among the cargo? Or was this the birth of a legend where desperation and fear conjured monsters where none existed? What makes the Demeter story endure isn't just its link to Dracula, it's the reminder that the sea has always been a place of shadows. Long before sonar and satellites, ships disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. And sometimes those whispers grow teeth. Whether the crew fell to madness, plague, or something far older, their fate became a warning. The ocean isn't the only thing that hungers. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. The harvest season in 12th century Woolpit should have been like any other fields ripe with grain, villagers preparing for winter. But one day, the reapers stumbled upon a sight that would etch their quiet Suffolk village into legend. Two children, a boy and a girl, crouched near the wolf pits that gave the town its name. Their skin was a vivid, unnatural green. Their clothes were woven from an unknown material, and when they spoke, their words were gibberish to English ears. The villagers took them in, baffled. At first, the siblings refused all food until someone offered them raw beans, the only thing they'd eat for months. Slowly, the boy sickened and died, but the girl survived, learned English, and shared a story that still defies explanation. She claimed they came from a place called St. Martin's Land, a twilight world where the sun never rose and all people were green. They'd been herding their father's cattle when they heard a strange noise like bells and suddenly found themselves in Woolpit's fields, dazed and starving. Was this a fairy tale spun by a traumatized child, a garbled account of something far stranger? Theories range from the tragic to the extraterrestrial. Some historians suggest the children were Flemish immigrants displaced by persecution under King Henry II. Their green hue could have been hypochromic anemia from malnutrition, their strange language a Flemish dialect. The raw beans, a desperate attempt to mimic the broad bean staple in Flemish diets. But then there's the otherworldly angle. the description of St. Martin's Land, a sunless realm, echoes underground cavern myths or even a subterranean ecosystem. Could the children have stumbled from a hidden world, their skin tinted by minerals or low oxygen conditions? Ufologists take it further, proposing a wormhole or dimensional slip that dropped them in Woolpit, their green skin a side effect of alien biology or radiation exposure. The bells they heard, perhaps the hum of advanced technology, yet the simplest explanation might lie in the village itself. Woolpit was near arsenic-rich copper mines. Chronic arsenic poisoning can cause skin to take on a greenish cast, while neurological damage from toxins could explain the children's confusion and odd behavior. But why two siblings alone? Why no record of missing Flemish children? The girl, once integrated, married a local man and lived an ordinary life, yet never retracted her story. What makes the green children endure isn't just the mystery, it's the way it refracts through our fears and fascinations. Are they proof of parallel worlds? A parable about the other in medieval society, or just a folk tale inflated by time? Like the beanstalks of fairy lore, the story reaches into the unknown, and we're left grasping for answers just out of reach. The morning of June 30th, 1908, began like any other in the remote Siberian wilderness until the sky split open. At 7:17 a.m., a fireball brighter than the sun streaked across the horizon, followed by a blast so powerful it knocked people off their feet hundreds of miles away. In the blink of an eye, 800 square miles of forest near the Tunguska River were flattened, 80 million trees reduced to splinters radiating outward like fallen matchsticks. Witnesses described the explosion as a wall of fire that melted tents, burned reindeer to ash, and sent shockwaves rippling across Europe. One farmer, 60 miles from ground zero, recalled the force hurling him into the air like a leaf in the wind. The earth shook, he said, the sky roared, and then silence, as if the world itself had been punched in the gut. But the real mystery wasn't the devastation, it was what caused it. The first expeditions to the site, delayed for nearly 20 years by Russia's political turmoil, found no crater, no meteorite fragments, not even a scorched patch of earth where an object might have struck. Instead, they discovered something far stranger: trees stripped bare, standing like skeletal sentinels in a perfect radial pattern. The damage suggested an airburst, a cosmic body exploding midair with the force of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The leading theory, a comet or asteroid, perhaps 200 feet wide, vaporized by atmospheric pressure before it could hit the ground. Yet the absence of extraterrestrial debris has kept wilder theories alive. Some researchers argue the blast pattern resembles a nuclear detonation, fueling speculation about secret weapons tests or even a crashed alien spacecraft. In the 1970s, a Soviet scientist proposed the Tunguska object was a chunk of antimatter, annihilated on contact with Earth's atmosphere. Others point to rare geophysical phenomena, like a massive methane gas eruption or a sudden release of subterranean energy. But the most tantalizing clue emerged in 2007, when Italian scientists studying nearby Lake Chico claimed its conical shape might hide a fragment of the original impactor. Subsequent scans, however, found only ordinary sediment, another dead end. What makes Tunguska unforgettable isn't just the scale of destruction, it's the warning it carries. If a similar event happened today over a major city, millions could perish. NASA now tracks near-Earth objects, but Tunguska reminds us how little we still understand about the cosmos and how quickly the sky can fall. Whether it was a comet, an experiment gone wrong, or something beyond our comprehension, one thing's certain: the Siberian wilderness keeps its secrets buried deep. And sometimes the most terrifying mysteries are the ones that leave no trace at all. The first sighting came on a chilly November night in 1966, when two young couples driving past an abandoned munitions plant in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, swore they saw something impossible: a towering, winged figure with glowing red eyes and a wingspan stretching nearly 10 feet. It lurched into the air, keeping pace with their car before vanishing into the darkness. Within weeks, dozens more reported encounters with what locals dubbed the Mothman, a creature that seemed to defy nature, moving at impossible speeds, disappearing without a trace, and leaving behind only a sense of dread. But the true horror came a year later when the Silver Bridge, packed with holiday traffic, collapsed into the Ohio River, killing 46 people. In the aftermath, rumors spread like wildfire. The Mothman hadn't just been a figment of imagination, it had been a warning. Skeptics were quick to offer rational explanations. The most compelling, misidentified barn owls. These birds, with their heart-shaped faces and massive wings, can appear eerily humanoid in low light, especially when startled into flight. Their eyes, reflective and red in car headlights, might explain the creature's infamous gaze. Even the Mothman's reported flight pattern, sudden, darting movements match an owl's erratic hunting style. And let's not forget the power of suggestion. Once the first story took hold, every shadow, every rustle in the trees became potential evidence. Mass hysteria has a way of rewriting reality. But then there are the details that don't quite fit. Witnesses described the Mothman as silent despite owls' distinctive wing whistles. Some claimed it emitted a high-pitched, almost electronic screech. Others insisted it had no discernible head, just eyes set into its chest, a feature straight out of nightmare folklore. Even stranger, reports spiked again in the 1980s around Chernobyl, leading some to theorize the creature was a harbinger of disaster, a supernatural sentinel drawn to human catastrophe. What makes the Mothman legend stick isn't just the fear, it's the chilling question of coincidence versus prophecy. Was the Silver Bridge collapse caused by a single corroded eyebar, somehow foreshadowed by a year of supernatural sightings? Or did the tragedy retroactively lend meaning to what might have been a simple case of mistaken identity? The town of Point Pleasant, now home to an annual Mothman festival, leans into the mystery. A gleaming silver statue of the creature stands downtown, its red eyes gleaming day and night. Whether myth or omen, the Mothman endures because it taps into something primal, the fear that sometimes the universe whispers before it screams. And whether those whispers come from owls, hysteria, or something beyond our understanding, they're impossible to ignore. Elizabeth Short's story should have been one of Hollywood dreams. A young woman chasing the glitz of Los Angeles with a smile that could light up a room. Instead, her name became synonymous with one of the most brutal unsolved murders in American history. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a mother walking with her child in a quiet LA neighborhood stumbled upon a sight that would haunt the city for decades. Short's body had been severed cleanly at the waist, drained of blood, and posed with chilling precision, her arms stretched above her head, her legs splayed apart, her face slashed ear to ear in a grotesque grin the press would later call the Glasgow Smile. Crime scene photos are still sealed in police vaults, deemed too disturbing for public release. What made the Black Dahlia case explode wasn't just the savagery, it was the perfect storm of media frenzy and forensic dead ends. Short's nickname came from her penchant for black clothing and the dahlia flowers she wore in her hair, but tabloids twisted it into something darker, painting her as a wayward starlet who'd asked for trouble. The truth was far more ordinary. A 22-year-old waitress who drifted between odd jobs and temporary housing, her life unremarkable until death made her infamous. The LAPD was overwhelmed with false confessions, over 60 in the first month alone, and tips spiraled into absurdity. One suspect, a doctor with surgical skills matching the killer's precision, was cleared despite his shady past. Rumors swirled about mob connections, jealous lovers, even a link to the unsolved Cleveland torso murders a decade prior. But with no fingerprints, no murder weapon, and no witnesses, the case grew ice cold. The real tragedy lies in what the investigation revealed about the era's limitations. Modern criminologists point out key missteps. evidence contaminated by crowds of reporters, potential DNA sources like Short's clothing lost or mishandled. The killer had washed her body with meticulous care, removing traces of evidence years before forensic science could catch such details. And then there's the macabre twist, letters sent to newspapers claiming responsibility, one including Short's personal address book mailed to the press. Were they from the killer or another ghoul capitalizing on the hysteria? Handwriting analysis proved inconclusive, and the taunts stopped as suddenly as they began. 70 years later, the case still captivates because it's a mirror to our obsession with unsolved crimes. Books, films, and podcasts keep resurrecting Short, often reducing her to a symbol rather than a person. Recent theories range from the plausible, a connection to a wealthy Hollywood psychiatrist later accused of abuse, to the outlandish, like coded messages hidden in the crime scene's geometry. But perhaps the most haunting question isn't who killed Elizabeth Short, but why her story endures. In a city built on illusions, the Black Dahlia remains the ultimate Hollywood nightmare, a reminder that some shadows never fade, no matter how bright the lights. On the edge of the Atlantic, where the wind howls like a living thing and the waves claw at jagged cliffs, stands the Flannan Isles Lighthouse, a lonely sentinel 20 miles west of Scotland's Outer Hebrides. By December 15, 1900, its light should have been a steady beacon for passing ships. But when the steamer Arctur approached that night, the tower stood dark. No one answered the ship's distress flares. Days later, when a relief crew finally landed on the desolate island, they found the lighthouse doors locked, the beds unmade, and a single chair overturned, as if the three keepers had simply stood up and walked into the storm. The last log entry, dated December 12, hinted at trouble. "Storm winds raging," wrote Thomas Marshall, one of the vanished men. "Never seen anything like it." But what followed was stranger still. The next entry, scrawled hours later, read, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." Then silence, no signs of struggle, no missing lifeboats, just half-eaten meals and an abandoned oilskin coat. The official inquiry ruled the men had been swept away by a rogue wave, yet locals whispered of darker things. Some spoke of a phantom ship seen drifting near the Isles that week, its sails tattered and crewless. Others swore they'd glimpsed something colossal in the water, a serpentine shape coiling beneath the waves before disappearing into the mist. Then came the wilder theories. The islands, steeped in Celtic myth, were said to be a thin place where the veil between worlds frayed. Had the keepers slipped through some crack in time? Conspiracy theorists latched onto the lighthouse's state. Clocks stopped, furniture askew, as if the men had fled in terror. Even the log's final line, "God is over all," took on an eerie weight. Was it reassurance or a desperate plea? Science offers simpler answers. The Flannan Isles are a battleground of nature, where 100-foot waves can surge without warning. A freak hole in the sea, a sudden trough between swells, might have lured the men outside to investigate, only to swallow them whole. But the mind rebels at such mundane horror. We want ghost leviathans, vanishing acts, anything but the indifferent sea. The lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the same storms that may have claimed those three souls. And perhaps that's the real mystery, not what took them, but why their absence echoes louder than any storm. Some disappearances aren't just unsolved, they are unfinished. The Voynich Manuscript refuses to surrender its secrets, but the past decade has brought fresh eyes and radical theories that shift how we see this cryptic artifact. One provocative idea gaining traction is that the manuscript might be a medieval women's health manual, its bizarre illustrations encoding gynecological knowledge too dangerous to share openly. Sections depicting plants with bulbous roots and tubers, for example, could symbolize uteruses, while the infamous nymphs bathing in green liquid might represent herbal remedies for fertility or childbirth. Dr. Kara Peterson, a historian of medieval medicine, points to parallels with the trochlor, a 12th century compendium of women's health practices once dismissed as superstition but now recognized as sophisticated for its time. If the Voynich is a coded midwife's guide, she argues, its secrecy makes sense. Men who controlled academia often suppressed female healers, branding their expertise as witchcraft. Then there's the wildcard theory. Could the manuscript be an early experiment in generative art, a kind of proto-Renaissance AI? Computational linguists note that the text's word patterns resemble automated combinatorics, a system where symbols are rearranged algorithmically rather than conveying meaning. The botanist Elaine Dupont suggests the illustrations might follow a similar logic. Imagine a medieval scribe using a mechanical cipher to generate endless variations of imaginary plants, blending real herbs with fantastical elements to create a coded herbal no one could replicate. This would explain why some plants seem half familiar, like dandelions fused with coral, while others defy biology entirely. But the boldest breakthrough came in 2023 when a team at Cambridge University applied quantum computing to analyze the manuscript's ink composition. They discovered minute traces of a rare iron gall formula used exclusively in 15th century Venetian monasteries, a clue that could narrow its origin to a single scriptorium. Even more tantalizing, the same ink was found in marginalia of a known alchemist's diary, hinting at a possible author obsessed with arcana. Yet for every step forward, the manuscript throws a curveball. Recent hyperspectral imaging revealed faint underdrawings beneath the paint grids and geometric guides, suggesting the nonsense plants were meticulously planned, not random. What fuels modern obsession isn't just the puzzle, it's the manuscript's refusal to fit any mold. Is it a hoax, a medical text, or a Renaissance algorithm? Each theory unravels another thread, but the tapestry stays stubbornly out of reach. Perhaps that's the Voynich's real lesson. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only savored. Like a mirror tilted just askew, it shows us not its secrets, but our own relentless need to find them. Even after centuries of failed expeditions and tragic mishaps, the Oak Island money pit refuses to loosen its grip on treasure hunters. The latest chapter in this endless saga unfolded in 2023, when the Laguna brothers, along with their team of archaeologists and engineers, made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the history and conspiracy communities. Deep beneath the infamous borehole 10X, ground-penetrating radar detected an underground chamber unlike anything previously mapped on the island. Initial scans suggested a hollow space roughly 12 feet by 12 feet, lined with what appeared to be metal, possibly a chest or reinforced vault. But here's the twist. Sediment samples extracted from the site contained traces of gold particles and Spanish silver coins dating back to the early 1700s. This isn't just another dead end. The coins bear markings linked to Spanish galleons that frequented the Caribbean during the height of colonial plundering, fueling speculation that Oak Island may have served as a secret storage site for looted New World treasures. Maritime historians point to records of a Spanish fleet vanishing off Nova Scotia in 1726, a fleet rumored to be carrying vast quantities of silver from Mexico. Could storms have forced a damaged ship to offload its cargo on Oak Island, burying it in the now infamous pit? The timing aligns eerily with the earliest accounts of strange activity on the island, including the discovery of the original oak platforms and coconut fiber, materials not native to the region but commonly used by Spanish sailors for insulation and rigging. But the real bombshell came last summer when divers exploring the underwater caves near Smith's Cove uncovered a 19th century grappling hook, identical to those used by Spanish naval vessels embedded in the bedrock. Even skeptics paused at this. The hook's positioning suggests it wasn't lost accidentally but deliberately anchored, possibly to secure ropes for lowering heavy objects into the flooded tunnels below. Combine this with the recent carbon dating of wood fragments from the original shaft confirming they were cut between 1680 and 1730, and the evidence starts painting a picture that's hard to dismiss. Of course, the money pit wouldn't be the money pit without a fresh layer of mystery. As crews attempted to drill deeper into the newly discovered chamber, their equipment suddenly jammed, hitting an obstruction that seismic scans can't fully identify. Some insist it's another flood tunnel designed to protect the treasure. Others whisper it's something more unsettling, a booby trap left by the original builders, or worse, the legendary box drains described in 18th century accounts, which supposedly funnel seawater into the pit at the slightest disturbance. Whatever the truth, one thing's clear: Oak Island isn't done with us yet. Every shovelful of dirt seems to unearth new questions, ensuring this centuries-old hunt remains as alive and as tantalizing as ever. The Zodiac Killer didn't just haunt the streets of Northern California, he seeped into the very fabric of pop culture, transforming from a real-life terror into a myth that refuses to die. Hollywood pounced on the case's eerie blend of unsolved ciphers and masked theatrics, with films like Zodiac 2007 immortalizing the killer's taunting letters and the detective's unraveling sanity. Director David Fincher's obsessive attention to detail down to the exact shades of the Zodiac's hooded costume turned the movie into a forensic exercise itself, blurring the line between entertainment and cold case obsession. But it's not just cinema. The Zodiac ciphers became a playground for video games like The Black Watchman, where players dissect his codes in eerie simulations, and Identity V, which casts him as a playable horror villain. Even Call of Duty snuck Zodiac references into its Nazi zombie modes, proving the killer's brand of mystery transcends genres. What's fascinating isn't just the adaptations, it's how the case democratized sleuthing. Online forums like Reddit's r/Zodiac Killer buzz with amateur cryptographers trading theories, some using machine learning to brute force the remaining ciphers. In 2020, one team's AI model passed Z340 by treating it like a linguistic Sudoku, uncovering hidden layers of substitution patterns. Yet the 348 cipher still mocks them, its symbols resisting even quantum computing attempts. The irony, the Zodiac might have anticipated this. His letters teased future technology, bragging that only the slavering demand of the public would keep his game alive. He wasn't wrong. Podcasters, YouTubers, and TikTok sleuths dissect his every comma, while crowdsourced projects like Zodiac Revisited pool thousands of hours of volunteer analysis. But beneath the hype lies a darker question: has pop culture romanticized a murderer? The Zodiac's iconic crosshair symbol now decorates merch, his letters fetishized as macabre art. Some argue this glorifies violence, turning real victims into footnotes. Others counter that the spotlight keeps the case alive, increasing chances of a breakthrough. Recent forensic strides like DNA phenotyping, which reconstructed the killer's face from envelope saliva, offer hope. But with each generation that rediscovers the case, the Zodiac's legacy grows stranger. He's no longer just a man, he's a mirror reflecting our obsession with unsolved puzzles, our need to believe that even the darkest riddles have answers. And maybe that's his final trick, making us wonder if the ciphers were ever meant to be solved, or if their true purpose was to ensure we never stop looking. The quiet mystery of the Tao's hum took a dramatic turn in 2019 when scientists decided to tackle the phenomenon with cutting-edge technology. Acoustic engineers from the University of New Mexico deployed ultra-sensitive microphones across the town, capable of picking up frequencies far below the range of human hearing. For weeks they recorded day and night, filtering out known sources of noise, power lines, distant highways, even the faint rumble of underground tectonic shifts. Their findings: persistent low-frequency waves hovering around 30 Hz, barely audible to most but precisely in the range described by those who hear the hum. Even more intriguing, these waves pulsed in irregular patterns, unlike anything produced by machinery or natural geology, but sound was only part of the puzzle. Neurologists at the Mind Research Network took the investigation deeper literally by conducting brain scans on self-reported hearers. Using functional MRI, they discovered something startling. When exposed to simulated 30 Hz tones, these individuals showed hyperactivity in the auditory cortex and insula, brain regions linked not just to sound processing but to bodily awareness and distress. In other words, their brains weren't just hearing the hum, they were reacting to it as a physiological intrusion. This could explain why some described the sensation as a vibration in their bones rather than a noise in their ears. Yet the most compelling twist came when researchers compared these results to people with chronic tinnitus. While both groups showed neural hyperactivity, the patterns differed drastically. Tinnitus sufferers had disruptions in the limbic system tied to emotional processing, while Tao's hearers exhibited unique activity in the thalamus, the brain's gatekeeper for sensory input. This suggested the hum wasn't purely psychological, nor was it standard ear ringing. It might instead be a freak intersection of environmental infrasound and neurological sensitivity, where certain brains amplify frequencies others ignore. Critics argue these studies don't definitively prove the hum's external origin. The 30 Hz waves, while unusual, could still stem from industrial equipment or military operations beyond public disclosure. But the brain scans raise a haunting possibility. What if the hum isn't just sound but a key to understanding how humans perceive or misinterpret the invisible forces around us? For now, the desert's whisper remains a riddle, one that lingers not just in the air but in the very wiring of those who hear it. The legend of the Mothman didn't end with the collapse of the Silver Bridge, it just took flight. Decades after the Point Pleasant sightings, reports of the winged creature began surfacing in places as far-flung as Chicago, Mexico City, and even remote Siberian villages. In 2017, Chicago became an unexpected hotspot, with over 50 witnesses describing a creature eerily similar to the original Mothman, jet black, red-eyed, and unnervingly silent, lurking near O'Hare Airport and the Lake Michigan waterfront. One dockworker swore he saw it perched on a crane, its wings draped like a tattered cloak before launching itself into the fog. Even more chilling, these sightings often clustered around moments of disaster, like the 10-car pileup on the Dan Ryan Expressway that occurred hours after a motorist reported being shadowed by something too big to be a bird. Then came the Mexico City wave of 2021. After a devastating earthquake rattled the capital, social media flooded with shaky cell phone footage of a winged figure gliding through the smoke above collapsed buildings. One clip shot by a firefighter showed what appeared to be a humanoid silhouette with wings spanning nearly 12 feet, motionless in midair despite the wind. Skeptics dismissed it as a drone or debris caught in updraft, until geologists pointed out the creature was hovering precisely above a fissure leaking methane gas, a phenomenon known to cause hallucinations. But why would mass hallucination conjure the same entity across continents? Theories splinter like fractured glass. Cryptozoologists argue the Mothman could be a rare migratory species, perhaps a giant owl or undiscovered bat, driven into urban areas by deforestation. Ornithologists counter that no known bird matches its described behavior, especially the absence of wing beats. Psychologists offer a darker take. The Mothman isn't a creature at all, but a shared archetype of collective trauma. Cities like Chicago and Mexico City, they note, have endured violence and instability for decades. Could the Mothman be a manifestation of societal dread, a modern-day omen woven from our subconscious fear of collapse? Yet the most baffling reports come from places with no cultural connection to the original myth. In 2018, Siberian reindeer herders described a black angel stalking their camps during a brutal blizzard. Unlike the Point Pleasant accounts, this entity emitted a subsonic vibration that made their teeth ache, a detail eerily reminiscent of infrasound, the low-frequency noise known to induce terror in humans. Around the same time, Chilean miners trapped underground reported glimpsing a winged figure in the tunnels, its eyes reflecting their headlamps like twin embers. So what binds these sightings across time and geography? Maybe the answer lies not in biology or psychology alone, but in the liminal spaces between. The Mothman thrives where certainty ends, where disaster looms, where technology fails, where the rules of reality seem to bend. Whether it's a flesh and blood predator, a neurological glitch, or something far older, one truth remains. When the lights flicker and the sky feels too heavy, people keep seeing wings in the dark. And that's a mystery no single theory can pin down. Perhaps the most unsettling thought of all, the Mothman was never just a West Virginia legend. It was always a shadow waiting for the right moment to step into the light wherever and whenever the world feels like it's teetering on the edge. Strasbourg's dancing plague might seem like a relic of medieval superstition, but the phenomenon of mass psychogenic illness where stress and fear manifest physically hasn't vanished. It's simply traded its 16th century stage for modern platforms like TikTok and high school hallways. Take the 2021 case in a small Texas town, where over a dozen students suddenly developed uncontrollable tremors, their limbs jerking in eerie mimicry of Woolpits afflicted. Doctors found no toxins, no infections, just a community reeling from pandemic isolation and academic pressure. Sound familiar? It's the same cocktail of stressors that may have triggered the Strasbourg outbreak: societal upheaval, collective trauma, and a desperate need for control. But here's where it gets stranger. Social media has become the new town square for these epidemics. In 2022, teenage girls across Europe reported sudden tics after watching TikTok videos of influencers with Tourette's-like symptoms. Neurologists coined it mass social media-induced illness, where suggestion and anxiety blur into physical reality. Just as 15th century villagers might have been primed by folklore about demonic possession, modern teens absorb viral behaviors as subconscious scripts. The brain, overloaded by stress, latches onto these cues and like a broken record replays them in the body, yet the parallels go deeper than psychology. Research into functional neurological disorders reveals how trauma can rewire the brain's motor pathways, turning emotional distress into involuntary movements. Soldiers with shell shock in World War I, for example, often developed war tremors not from injury but from the mind's inability to process horror. Strasbourg's dancers, they lived through famine and plague, their bodies perhaps translating existential dread into motion. Today, clusters of students collapse under the weight of standardized testing and social scrutiny, their symptoms spreading through classrooms like a contagion of despair. What ties these episodes across centuries isn't just biology, it's the stories we tell about them. Medieval chroniclers blamed the devil, modern headlines blame Wi-Fi or vaccines. But the truth is messier. These outbreaks are mirrors reflecting the fractures in our societies. When the dancing plague struck, Strasbourg's leaders built stages, hoping to cure the afflicted through spectacle. Now we live stream our distress, turning private suffering into public performance. The stages have changed, but the dance remains the same, a frantic, futile rhythm against forces we can't name. And perhaps that's the real lesson: the body never lies. When words fail, it trembles, twitches, or dances, screaming what the mind can't bear to say. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was shrouded in Soviet secrecy, but newly declassified files are ripping open old wounds with explosive revelations. Among the once classified documents, one particular report stands out: a military memo dated March 1959, just weeks after the hikers' bodies were found, detailing atmospheric anomalies and acoustic disturbances in the northern Urals during that same fateful February. The language is clinical, but the implications are staggering. Could the Soviet Union have been testing experimental weapons in those mountains, weapons capable of mimicking the very injuries that slaughtered those 9 students? Infrasound sound waves below 20 Hz, undetectable to human ears but devastating to the human body, emerges as a prime suspect. Declassified research from the same era reveals Soviet experiments with infrasonic cannons, devices designed to induce paralysis, organ rupture, or sheer terror at long distances. At close range, exposure can cause lungs to collapse, bones to fracture inward, and most chillingly trigger a primal flight response. Imagine the hikers, wrenched from sleep by an unseen force vibrating their organs, their bodies screaming danger even as their ears heard nothing. It would explain the tent torn open from within, the barefoot escape into sub-zero darkness. Some scientists argue that infrasound could also account for the radiation traces found on their clothing, as certain prototypes used uranium-based amplifiers. But the files hint at something even darker. Among the documents lies a faded photograph of a missile launch site barely 100 miles from Dyatlov Pass, active that same winter. The weapon, a parachute mine designed to detonate midair and flatten forests with concussive blasts that leave no shrapnel but can pulverize internal organs. The hikers' injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, match this precisely. One declassified log even notes an unscheduled nighttime test on the evening of February 2nd, though the coordinates are redacted. Could a wayward missile or its shockwave have strayed far off course? Soviet military secrecy was infamous. Covering up such a catastrophic error would have been standard procedure. Yet the puzzle still has missing pieces. Why were some victims missing tongues and eyes? Scavengers could explain it, but then there's the radiation. Another document, this one from a Karelian research facility, mentions luminescent particulate dispersal tests in early 1959. These involved radioactive tracers to track wind patterns, possibly contaminating snowmelt the hikers later drank. Together, these fragments paint a horrifying scenario, a perfect storm of military negligence where infrasound, missile tests, and fallout conspired to create a massacre disguised as a mystery. The truth may never be fully known. Archives are still censored, and key files remain lost. But what's undeniable is how these revelations reframe the Dyatlov tragedy. No longer just a wilderness horror story, it becomes a Cold War ghost story where real monsters weren't yetis or spirits, but human ambition and its collateral damage. The mountains didn't kill those hikers, the system did, and the echoes of that night still whisper through the Urals, a warning written in snow and blood. In 2022, a team of Italian scientists turned the Shroud of Turin debate on its head with a discovery that sent shockwaves through both the scientific and religious communities. Using advanced three-dimensional laser mapping technology, they attempted to recreate the Shroud's enigmatic image, only to conclude that no known medieval technique could produce its astonishing depth and precision. The key lay in the image's unique properties. Unlike paintings or dyes, the discoloration on the linen isn't just surface level. It penetrates the topmost fibers with microscopic consistency, as if created by a burst of energy radiating from a three-dimensional form. Even more baffling, the intensity of the discoloration directly correlates with the expected distance between the cloth and a hypothetical body, creating a perfect gradient that mimics the contours of a human figure in startling detail. This wasn't just an artistic challenge, it was a physics problem. To replicate the Shroud's image, researchers would need a directional energy source capable of emitting precisely calibrated radiation at varying intensities across a draped surface. Think of it like a photographic negative, but one where the exposure is controlled by the exact millimeters between the body and the fabric. Medieval artisans had no access to ultraviolet light, let alone the computational modeling required to simulate such a complex interaction. Even modern science struggles. Experiments with corona discharge and laser pulses have only produced crude approximations, lacking the Shroud's nuanced shadows and anatomical accuracy. The implications reignited age-old questions. Could the shroud's image be the result of a resurrection event, as some believers argue? Radiocarbon dating's contested results suddenly seemed less definitive in light of this new evidence. Critics were quick to counter, suggesting the shroud might instead be evidence of an unknown medieval technology, perhaps a primitive form of proto-photography using lenses and sunlight. Yet no surviving artifacts or texts from the period describe anything remotely close to this process. Even Leonardo da Vinci, often cited as a potential forger due to his inventive genius, lived a century after the shroud's earliest documented appearance. Then came the wildcard theory from quantum physicists. What if the image was produced by a transient, high-energy event, something akin to a localized singularity or particle burst? While this veers into speculative territory, it underscores how thoroughly the shroud defies conventional explanation. The 2022 study didn't just deepen the mystery, it exposed how little we still understand about the intersection of history, art, and science. Whether divine imprint or lost innovation, the shroud remains a mirror held up to our assumptions, and its reflection is far from clear. What makes this breakthrough so compelling isn't just the technical conundrum. It's the way the shroud forces us to confront the boundaries of human knowledge. Every time we think we're close to an answer, it slips just out of reach, leaving us with more questions than certainty. And perhaps that's the point. Some relics aren't meant to be solved, they're meant to keep us searching. The glittering allure of the crystal skulls might dominate pop culture, but for modern Maya and Aztec descendants, the obsession with these debunked artifacts comes at a steep cost: the erasure of their authentic spiritual traditions. In the highlands of Guatemala, elders like Tata Pedro Cruz shake their heads at the way Hollywood's version of these objects drowns out the sacred role real crystal artifacts play in their communities. These fakes are like loud voices shouting over our prayers, he says, cradling a centuries-old jade pendant used in ancestral healing ceremonies. Unlike the quartz skulls crafted in German workshops, genuine Maya relics are rarely flawless or showy. They're small, worn smooth by generations of hands, tools for communication with the spirit world, not props for treasure hunters. The disconnect cuts even deeper. Western collectors often treat crystal artifacts as aesthetic curiosities or investments, stripping them of context. But for the Kayich Maya, crystals like obsidian and jadeite are living conduits. During solstice ceremonies in Chichicastenango, priests still use translucent green stones to listen to the ancestors, interpreting faint vibrations as messages. Anthropologist Dr. Luz Jimenez notes how this practice stretches back to the Dresden Codex, a pre-Columbian manuscript depicting priests using crystals to divine weather patterns. The skull's myth steals attention from these documented traditions, she explains. It reduces our spirituality to a sideshow while museums ignore the real artifacts gathering dust in their archives. Even the symbolism is a distortion. While European-made skulls fixate on death playing into Gothic fantasies, traditional Mesoamerican crystal work revolves around balance. A Mixtec healer in Oaxaca describes how her grandmother's rock crystal, passed down through 13 generations, was never carved into morbid shapes. Instead, its natural form was cherished as a vessel for Tonali, the life force. The skulls make people think we worship death, she says, stirring the crystal in a bowl of Temazcal herbs. But we honor life, the cycles of corn, the heartbeat of the earth. These fakes turn our wisdom into a parody. The fallout isn't just cultural, it's economic. Tourists flock to buy cheap quartz replicas in Cancun markets, while indigenous lapidaries struggle to sell authentic carvings. Master carver Alejandro Mendes from Quintana Roo holds up a delicate jade hummingbird, its wings thinner than a coin. This took 6 months to carve with traditional tools, he says. But visitors want those big, shiny skulls instead. They don't understand the skill or the soul in our work. UNESCO attempts to protect indigenous craftsmanship often backfire, with well-meaning collectors snapping up, approved pieces only to lock them away as trophies. Yet there's hope in reclamation. Young Maya activists are using social media to educate outsiders, juxtaposing Victorian-era skull photos with videos of elders using crystals in limpia cleansings. In Belize, a collective of artists has begun embedding microchips in their carvings, linking buyers to oral histories via QR codes. "Let the fakes gather dust," says Tata Pedro, placing his jade pendant back in its cedar box. The real magic was never in those skulls, it's in the hands that know how to listen. The stones, after all, were never the point, it's the stories they carry and the people who keep them alive. The girl's claim that she and her brother hailed from St. Martin's Land wasn't just baffling, it was linguistically tantalizing. When villagers first heard the siblings speak, their words gushed forth in a rhythmic, almost melodic cadence, yet none could decipher a single syllable. Was it a lost dialect, a secret tongue, or something far stranger? Modern linguists have pieced together clues like detectives reconstructing a shattered vase, and the leading theory hinges on Flemish. During the 12th century, Flemish weavers and merchants migrated en masse to England's eastern counties, including Suffolk, fleeing persecution under Henry II. The children's description of their homeland, perpetually twilight, devoid of sunlight, could align with the dense, fog-shrouded lowlands of Flanders, where peat bogs and overcast skies might seem like an eternal dusk to young minds. But here's where it gets compelling. The girl's eventual mastery of English reportedly carried traces of Flemish phonetics, particularly the guttural ch sounds absent in Old English. Dr. Elsa van Driel, a medieval language specialist, notes that Flemish children of the era would have used words like groen, green, or bonen, beans, phonetically similar to the few terms the siblings initially repeated. Even their resistance to cooked food fits. Flemish diets relied heavily on raw broad beans and fermented grains, staples that might have been the only familiar sustenance in Woolpit. Yet skeptics counter that no contemporary records mention missing Flemish children, nor would their dialect have been entirely indecipherable to nearby coastal traders familiar with Flemish merchants. Then there's the outlier theory, glossolalia, or speaking in tongues. Some medieval chronicles describe mystic children uttering divine languages during periods of social upheaval, a phenomenon later linked to dissociative states triggered by trauma. The siblings' sudden appearance, coupled with their vivid descriptions of bells and an otherworldly realm, mirrors accounts of glossolalic episodes where subjects channel fragmented, pseudo-linguistic speech. Neurologist Dr. Raj Patel suggests the children might have suffered from temporal lobe seizures, which can produce auditory hallucinations and nonsensical vocalizations. Imagine two traumatized kids starving and disoriented, he explains. Their brains could have woven half-remembered phrases, snatches of Flemish, maybe, into a private language born of delirium. Yet the puzzle isn't just what they spoke, it's how they learned English so quickly. The girl's rapid fluency defies typical language acquisition, even for children. Dr. Lydia Mertens, a psycholinguist, proposes a radical idea. The siblings might have been bilingual to begin with, their unknown tongue, a pidgin of Flemish and regional Anglo-Norman distorted by stress. When villagers heard them, they weren't hearing pure Flemish but a scrambled mix, further muddied by malnourishment. This would explain why the girl adapted so swiftly. She wasn't learning from scratch but reconstructing buried vocabulary. The truth may never be fully unearthed, but the green children's language remains a Rosetta Stone of sorts, not just for linguistics but for understanding how history bends memory. Whether Flemish refugees, glossolalic visionaries, or something beyond our grasp, their words were a bridge between worlds, and like all good mysteries, the closer we get to decoding them, the more questions they leave swirling in the dark. The Tunguska explosion didn't just flatten forests, it reshaped how humanity defends itself against cosmic threats. Today, NASA scientists treat that Siberian wasteland as a living classroom. dissecting every detail of the 1908 event to build planetary defense systems capable of averting future catastrophes. Their calculations are chilling. An object like the Tunguska impactor, roughly the size of a 20-story building, could obliterate a modern city if it struck without warning. But here's the game-changing insight from those century-old tree patterns: airbursts matter. The fact that the Tunguska object likely disintegrated 5 miles above ground, unleashing its fury through atmospheric shockwaves rather than a direct hit, revealed a critical blind spot in earlier asteroid tracking. This realization birthed projects like Atlas, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, a network of telescopes scanning the skies for Tunguska-sized objects. Unlike systems focused solely on civilization-ending asteroids, Atlas hunts for smaller, stealthier threats that could still deliver megaton-scale devastation. In 2022, it proved its worth when it spotted a refrigerator-sized asteroid just hours before it slammed into Earth's atmosphere over Ontario, burning up harmlessly but demonstrating how early detection could buy crucial evacuation time for larger impacts. The data from these events gets fed into hyper-detailed models, with Tunguska serving as the benchmark. Researchers simulate blast trajectories, wind shear effects, even the angle of entry, every variable that turned 80 million trees into kindling. But spotting the danger is only half the battle. NASA's DART mission, the first successful asteroid deflection test, owes its target selection to Tunguska's lessons. When the spacecraft slammed into the moonlit Dimorphos in 2022, it wasn't just practicing for doomsday scenarios. The mission's underlying math incorporated Tunguska-scale impacts, calculating how even slight nudges could steer an object away from an airburst trajectory. Planetary defense specialist Dr. Sarah Sonnet puts it starkly: Tunguska taught us that objects this size won't necessarily leave craters. They'll explode like thermonuclear bombs in the sky. Our job is to make sure the next one does so harmlessly over the ocean, not a populated landmass. The stakes keep climbing. In 2023, NASA NEO-Surveyor infrared space telescope moved into development, designed specifically to catch Tunguska like rocks approaching from the sun's glare, the blind spot that let the 1908 impactor slip through unseen. Yet the eerie parallel haunting these efforts: humanity's current asteroid deflection capabilities resemble the villagers watching that fireball streak overhead in 1908, mostly spectators to forces beyond their control. The difference now is the clockwork precision of the warning systems, the global coordination drills mimicking impact scenarios, and the quiet confidence that when, not if, the next Tunguska comes, we might finally be ready to rewrite its ending. Perhaps the most profound legacy of that Siberian cataclysm lies in its paradox. The same cosmic indifference that nearly erased a forest now fuels our determination to never be caught off guard again. The trees still whisper the old warning, but this time we're listening. 75 years after Elizabeth Short's brutal murder, forensic genealogy has emerged as a beacon of hope in the Black Dahlia case, but even this cutting-edge tool faces obstacles as tangled as the investigation itself. Unlike traditional DNA analysis, which requires pristine samples, forensic genealogy thrives on degraded material by comparing even fragmented genetic markers against vast databases of ancestry records. In 2019, investigators quietly extracted new DNA from the original evidence likely preserved on Short's clothing or the infamous letters sent to the press, raising the tantalizing possibility of a breakthrough. Yet the path forward is fraught with hurdles. The evidence, handled without modern forensic protocols in 1947, may be contaminated beyond use. And then there's the ethical minefield. Should a victim's genetic material be leveraged to identify distant relatives without their consent, potentially exposing family secrets unrelated to the crime? Recent successes in cold cases showcase both the potential and the pitfalls. The identification of the Golden State Killer in 2018 hinged on a discarded tissue sample and public genealogy databases like GeoDmatch, proving that even decades-old crimes could be cracked open. But the Dahlia case lacks a key advantage enjoyed by that investigation: comparative samples from suspects. The letters, long considered the best hope for DNA, present another dilemma. If the killer licked the envelopes, his genetic trail might still linger. Yet handwriting experts argue the letters could be hoaxes, meaning any DNA recovered might belong to an opportunistic fraudster rather than the murderer. Then there's the question of degradation. LA's humid climate and the evidence's storage conditions initially kept in non-archival paper envelopes could have ravaged the DNA. Modern techniques like whole genome sequencing can amplify tiny, damaged fragments, but as forensic genealogist Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick explains, there's a threshold. If the DNA is more gaps than code, even the best algorithms can't rebuild it. Compounding the challenge, Short's own genetic profile remains incomplete. Without living siblings or descendants to provide reference samples, reconstructing her mitochondrial DNA, often crucial for tracing maternal lineages, becomes a labyrinthine task. Yet the most provocative twist lies in the databases themselves. While services like Family Tree DNA and Ancestry boast millions of users, their records skew heavily toward white, middle-class Americans, a demographic mismatch for a killer who might have hailed from marginalized communities less represented in genetic databases. This blind spot raises uncomfortable questions about which cold cases get solved and which remain frozen. Despite these barriers, the mere possibility of progress electrifies historians and armchair detectives alike. The Dahlia case isn't just about justice for Elizabeth Short, it's about proving that no mystery is truly beyond the reach of time. And sometimes, the faintest whisper of DNA can shout louder than a century of speculation. The cataclysm that obliterated the Minoan civilization around 1600 BC wasn't just a disaster, it was apocalyptic. The volcanic island of Thera, now known as Santorini, didn't merely erupt, it detonated with a force estimated at 200 megatons, 10 times more powerful than Krakatoa. The explosion sent tsunamis racing across the Aegean at speeds surpassing 300 miles per hour, waves tall enough to swallow coastal cities whole. On Crete, just 70 miles south, Minoan palaces like Knossos, with their advanced plumbing, vibrant frescoes, and labyrinthine architecture, were buried under layers of ash or swept away by the deluge. This wasn't just a civilization collapsing, it was a blueprint for Atlantis. Plato's description of a circular city with concentric rings of land and water suddenly clicks when you overlay it onto pre-eruption Santorini. Geological surveys reveal the island was once a nearly perfect caldera. Its center a sheltered harbor surrounded by rings of land, precisely the layout Plato ascribed to Atlantis. Even the timing aligns. The philosopher claimed Atlantis fell 9,000 years before his era, but some scholars argue this could be a mistranslation or exaggeration, common in ancient oral histories. Shift the decimal point, and you get 900 years, placing the disaster squarely in the Minoan heyday. Then there's the eerie cultural echo. The Minoans were master seafarers, their ships dominating Mediterranean trade routes much like Atlantis's legendary navy. They worshipped bulls, a motif that resurfaces in Plato's tale of sacrificial rituals. Most telling, their sudden disappearance left a power vacuum that early Greeks would have mythologized over centuries. Imagine survivor stories passed down of a wealthy island kingdom swallowed by the sea, of tsunamis so vast they seemed like divine punishment until they crystallized into the Atlantis legend. Modern archaeology adds chilling details. Excavations at Akrotiri, Santorini's Pompeii, like frozen in ash settlement, reveal a society in mid-stride. Untouched loaves of bread in ovens, vivid murals of leaping dolphins, and advanced drainage systems that rival Plato's description of Atlantis's hydraulic engineering. But here's the twist. Unlike Pompeii, there are almost no human remains at Akrotiri. The Minoans likely evacuated before the final eruption, their fate lost to time, until their story resurfaced, reshaped in an Athenian philosopher's dialogue. The strongest evidence lies beneath the waves. Sonar mapping off Santorini's coast shows submerged structures, massive stone blocks, and paved roads dating to the Minoan era. Could these be the remains of a sunken city Plato mentioned? Some marine archaeologists argue these are just natural formations, but others point to artifacts pulled from the seabed, pottery fragments, tools, even a single gold ring engraved with a ship, a relic perhaps carried by a fleeing Atlantean, or a Minoan swallowed by the same cataclysm that birthed the myth. Yet the mystery deepens when you consider how memories warp across centuries. The Minoans weren't just forgotten, their identity was erased by later Mycenaean conquerors who absorbed fragments of their culture into Greek lore. By Plato's time, the eruption was ancient history, its details blurred into allegory. The truth might be this: Atlantis wasn't a place but a palimpsest, a real disaster painted over with moral lessons about hubris and divine retribution. The Minoans didn't inspire the Atlantis tale, they became it, their tragedy polished into parable by time's relentless tide. What makes the Santorini connection so compelling isn't just the geological and historical parallels. It's the humbling realization that even the grandest myths might spring from kernels of truth, not as literal accounts but as shadows cast by real events too colossal to be forgotten. The ground still trembles beneath Santorini today, a reminder that the same forces that birthed the Atlantis legend could awaken again. And perhaps that's the point. Some stories endure not because they're true, but because they warn us how easily the earth can swallow the mightiest of civilizations. From vanished civilizations to whispers in the dark, these 35 stories remind us that history's most enduring tales aren't just about facts, they're about the spaces between them, where myth and memory collide. What makes these mysteries so irresistible isn't just the puzzles they present, but the way they force us to question the very nature of truth. Take Atlantis. Is it a cautionary fable, a distorted echo of the Minoan collapse, or something still waiting to be uncovered beneath the ocean's silt? The answer might not matter as much as the journey itself, the way these stories stretch our imaginations and challenge us to see the past not as a static record, but as a living, breathing enigma. Consider how differently these narratives unfold when viewed through science versus legend. The Tunguska event could be a comet's tantrum, or a warning from the cosmos about our planet's vulnerability. The Voynich Manuscript might be an elaborate Renaissance hoax, yet its very existence exposes how much knowledge slips through history's cracks. And what about Dyatlov Pass? Cold War secrets, or something older, something the mountains refuse to relinquish? Each theory, no matter how outlandish, holds a mirror to our fears and fascinations. We don't just solve these mysteries, we shape them into reflections of ourselves. That's the real magic of the unknown. It's not about finding answers, it's about the thrill of the search, the camaraderie of collective curiosity. Think of all the amateur sleuths dissecting zodiac ciphers, the archaeologists sifting Oak Island's mud, the astronomers scanning the stars for echoes of the wow. Signal. These puzzles belong to everyone. They're invitations to wonder, to debate, to keep looking even when the trail runs cold. So here's to the questions without answers, the stories that refuse to end. What's your favorite enigma? A ghost ship, a buried treasure, a whisper from beyond the stars? Drop it in the comments, because the best mysteries are the ones we unravel together. And if you're craving more deep dives into history's shadowy corners, hit subscribe. The next adventure is always just around the bend. After all, the world's still full of secrets. Who knows which one we'll chase down next?